Great. Happy to have you here tonight, and so glad you're here for today's educational series. Now, I think I'm going to be making this a new thing for this year, especially since I love sharing how food is medicine and how Lifewave is really your elixir. So there's not going to be a product review today on the Lifewave patches or the products, as I'm going to be talking about the new food pyramid that recently was released by the Health and Human Services Department, headed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I'm sure you know about it, but if you don't, I thought it would be really fun to go through it and give you some of my perspective on what I've observed and what the intention is. So as a health advocate, as you guys know, like myself, this is an exciting time, and why I thought it would be fun to see why the pyramid is turned upside down. That's what they're talking about. It literally is upside down, and what it all means for the future of food. And boy, is it time. Some of this stuff that we're hearing about is just mind-blowing, that I'm hearing for the first time in the 10 years that I've been preaching to the choir, so to speak, and yelling at the rooftops about how we need to do something about our broken food system. So, but first, before we get started, I did want to mention about the founder of Lifewave, because obviously people want to know about Lifewave and the products. And especially if you're new to me here and you're watching the recording, I have a lot of videos on all the different products and the patches in particular. But today we aren't going to be talking about that, but we are going to be discussing why good food in your system is so important in wearing and using Lifewave's products. And what I really love about David Schmidt is how in tuned he is with his own body and being, optimally healthy. And he talks about it all the time. He's like a walking encyclopedia about nutrition and wellness, and he's been studying it for, over 20, 25 plus years. He said he's always been interested in health, and he's my age. He's in his 60s. And I really appreciate the fact that that's the kind of company that Lifewave is. And we definitely have a person that cares about us as humans, and he really does walk the talk, and he's healthy and vibrant, and that's what I love about leadership. It starts at the top, and why I love this company. So of course, I'm honored to be part of Lifewave. I've been with the company since 2020, and it's an honor to be up here and sharing information. But just remember, when you're as a Lifewaver yourself and using the patches and the products, that what we're talking about today impacts your health. And when you are considering what you're eating, make sure you understand that the patches will work so much better, and all of his products, the Cellergize day and night formulas, the soon-to-be water machine that's coming out, they will only be catapulted in their symptom relief if you are taking good care of your body. So of course, I do want to mention that I wanted to mention why I'm doing this topic today, but to clarify a couple of things before we get started, that I'm not a doctor, and I am a health advocate. I do talk a lot about nutrition and supplements and products and etc. here, and talking about how you can live your best life. But this is just for information. This information today is, information that I've learned over about the decades of being a health advocate. And it's, it's just for information purposes only. And we're not here to cure, prevent, or treat any sort of, diseases or chronic issues. And if you are seeing a doctor and a specialist, you want to make sure that anything that we talk about today, or I talk about today, is, it's okay and safe for you. So be sure and keep that in mind when you're on my YouTube channel here, and I'm doing a lot of talks about products and health and wellness. Always consult with a specialist if you are being treated, and or you're seeing someone for symptoms. So we're going to get started here, and I before we dive in, I wanted to just mention that unless you've been avoiding media or hiding under a rock, as my husband likes to say, for people that aren't paying attention, that what we're going to be talking about today with this food pyramid is this huge shift that is going across the country now, and eventually will be worldwide too, because we have some of these chronic issues now all over the world. I travel a lot and I see it, because this obesity crisis is real. And so I'm going to open today with a video that I thought was really fascinating. I just discovered it. That was a commercial on the Super Bowl Sunday that just happened. And I literally almost fell out of my chair when I watched the video. So I'm going to be sharing that with you. I did say we were having a special appearance by someone. And so I'll start with that. And then we're going to talk about this new approved food pyramid afterwards. And really about the guidelines that have been established. And, it's not perfect. I'm going to admit that the pyramid was a little shocking for me to see how it's been done. But I get the message. We have to start somewhere, and I think that's what Kennedy Jr. was really trying to do, was to recognize the fact that we have to get off of all these processed foods, heavily processed foods. And so we may have some things within the pyramid that need to be tweaked, but at least we're bringing processed foods into the spotlight. About that's the reason for so many chronic illnesses today. It is the root cause, and because they're full of toxins, and we know that toxins are the root cause of all chronic illnesses as well. So just wanted to share with you that that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at a couple of the food pyramids. I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of things that I have several to show you based on my knowledge, and we're going to also look on at the past one that was prior to this 2026 pyramid. Again, that the shift is to get away from these processed foods, but to also recognize that we are in control. We have the ability to make decisions and to take our own health into our own hands when we are eating well. So I'm going to start with a video clip.
My sister's name was Denise. She died of obesity at 25. She had a heart attack. I was so fat and nasty. I would eat anything. I was like 345 pounds. A quart of ice cream every hour. I had so much self-hate when I was like that. I just wanted to kill myself. We're the most powerful country in the world, and we have the most obese, fudgy people. Something has to be done about processed food in this country.
So before we get started, I was really, I don't know, maybe you're seeing it for the first time and it didn't have the impact that it did with me. But what is so shocking about that, from my perspective, is that obviously this is Mike Tyson. And I don't know if anybody recognized that was Mike, but obviously he had a very challenged childhood. And what was sad is he said, I don't know if you caught that, the amount of ice cream he was eating every hour, and his weight being over 300 pounds. And what I recognized is, obviously he was in an impoverished situation. He probably didn't have parents paying much attention to him. And he obviously didn't have, the resources to obviously buy better quality ice cream. So not only was this consumption at high levels, but he was eating stuff that was probably less than real food, because most cheap products today that are on the market that have dairy in them have subpar dairy, that are GMO'd, or they're full of toxins because the animals are mistreated, and they also have tons and tons of processed sugar and probably other chemicals. So that was aggravating his weight, but it was also aggravating his emotional instability. And excuse me, my light is giving me some trouble today. So I just wanted to mention that I thought it was really interesting about his emotional state. And that's what these processed foods are doing. They're doing so much damage to our brain health, not to mention just our body, but to our brain health as well. All right, so let me get started here. We'll go back and start with my food pyramid. So this is the new pyramid. And as you can see, it is upside down. And I'm just going to touch here. I'll share you, do a comparison here in a second. But what was unusual for me is seeing it in such a, there's not in compartmentalized of the different food items and when you can eat them and how much and etc. So what's been interesting is it's been mixed together with the protein, dairy, and healthy fats all together, and vegetables and fruit. So it's kind of all mixed together up at the top, heavily weighted on that. And then as it trickles down, you'll see some things like nuts and seeds and maybe, fruit that has higher sugar content, not as much with the apples and the bananas and the grapes and that sort of thing. And then at the very bottom is you have whole grains. And so I have a little bit of an issue with that because I'm a real grain snob in terms of what that looks like and what that means, but at least it has been turned upside down. So I'm going to show you now the new pyramid. What I wanted to show you here was some of my concerns. Now, I have over here on the left long-term goals that I would like to see our government pay attention to. And hopefully Bobby's going to be able to start doing this and looking closer at it. But these are some things that concerned me. And then I have immediate action focus that I'd like to see happen right away if they're able to. So again, this is my opinion based on what I know and based on what I've experienced with my own health over the course of the last 20 years of taking good care of myself and figuring out what some of my chronic issues were caused from. So the reason I want to mention this is because there's nothing mentioned on any of this about being organic food and non-GMO. Those are two big factors that you want to pay attention to, because if they're not taking that into consideration, we're just giving carte blanche to eat all of these things, and that means you can go to McDonald's and you can eat all the protein, dairy, and healthy fats that you want there. But of course, we know McDonald's doesn't have healthy fats. That's in seed oils and all of the bad cooking oils that they're cooking in, and subpar food, because the animals they're using are cheap for a reason, because they're mistreated, and they're usually in industrial feedlots. And so it's not a healthy situation at all. So what I wanted to mention here is back to long-term goals. So organics really need to be focused. This needs to be an organic food pyramid. Whether people can afford it or not, we need to focus on organics and eventually get there. So this is the thing. These are obviously long-term goals. So there's nothing mentioned about non-GMOs, and we want to. I'm just going to tell you right now that there's proof that GMOs are just as bad as non-organic, and obviously worse, because they are harming the foods that they're being genetically modified foods. Has some purpose, but in general there's so much harm in them because of the way that they're made, and I don't have time to go into that, or grown, sorry. I don't have time to go into that, but I want to just say that non-GMOs should really be important on this food pyramid, especially for animals, not just humans. Needing to consume non-GMOs, but the animals need to be non-consuming or not consuming GMOs as well, because when they eat them and then we eat their product, their meat and their organs or whatever it is we're eating, and especially their dairy, we're getting those non-GMOs in our diet. We are what we eat. And then, of course, vegetables, fruits, and grains, those also need to be organic, non-GMO. And we are finding that they are hiding things and not telling you that when you are not buying organic, you think, oh, well, this is just maybe it has a few herbicides and pesticides and I'm going to go wash it off. And no, it's intrinsic in the vegetable and in the fruit. It's been grown and produced that way. So you can't wash this stuff off. And so there's some really harm and dangers there. I want to mention that seafood, we've got, here's a piece of salmon. There's a little bit of prawns, which are bottom dweller sea creatures. They're full of toxins, so you have to be careful with that. But you've got basically, there's no mention. You've got canned tuna here, for instance, and we know that there's a lot of there's a lot of issue with mercury in the wrong types of fish, and tuna carries a lot of mercury. So anyway, I do mention no farmed raised seafood either, and with exceptions, because there are some companies that are doing some sustainability where the animals, the fish are they're swimming in natural water, parts of the ocean, parts of the water that is kind of filtered off or blocked off for them to be growing and to be producing them. So I'm just telling you though, farmed raised seafood is in all your restaurants. And you want to be really, really careful about eating them out, and definitely when you're buying. And then, of course, no industrial feedlots, which is what I was talking about, where this is a big dream of mine, that all animals are either pasture or free-ranged animals, where they get to see the sun, they get to be outside, they get to eat grasses, they get to get bugs. And the industrial feedlots, that is not what happens in there. They're all born and raised and die in these very confined, dangerous, harmful situations. I'm actually surprised we don't have more issues with, getting sick by all these animals in the way that they're treated. And obviously full of antibiotics, because they have to be making sure they don't get sick because they're in such tight conditions. So again, this is a combination of things that nobody's talking about yet, that I hope. And then, of course, prepared foods without chemicals, seed oils, grains, and preservatives. So all of our prepared foods, no matter where you go, to Costco, to Safeway, to H-E-B, no matter which part of the country you live in, Whole Foods, prepared foods are full of seed oils and all of these things that are either genetically modified and or full of chemicals, and especially if they're not organic, because organic simple means you cannot put chemicals in the food and you cannot put preservatives and toxins of any sort. So then over here on the immediate action focus, I really want to see vegetables at the very top. It should just be heavily concentrated on vegetables, and you can eat those until the cows come home. No pun intended there, because we obviously have, vegetarians that don't eat cows, and so they obviously are doing pretty well with eating plenty of vegetables. But what a lot of them end up doing is, because they're hungry a lot, because they're not getting the protein sources that they need, they tend to become carbitarians, and that's dangerous, which is eating breads and simple carbs and pastas and rice and all those things that we know has, the pyramid's been turned upside down, and I'll show you here in a sec. And then meats and dairy limited per person. Now I mentioned, again, this is all mixed up here, but he's not talking about quantity. You want quality over quantity. And for those of you who wonder, well, how much protein should I really be eating if it is animal product? Because of vegetables, you can eat as much as you want. But on animals, you take your hand, and at the palm of your hand, that and kind of like, make a cup, that's about the size of protein that you should be eating. That should be the size of the steak, the chicken, the piece of fish, whatever it is, that's what it wants to be for your size of a hand. So if you're a big man, you get to eat more. If you're a small woman like I am, you eat a little less. And so it's important that we know that. Same thing with dairy. Dairy is loaded with hormones and estrogen mimicking ingredients from chemicals, because a lot of the industrial feedlot animals that are raised like that are full of antibiotics, and they're being fed grains that are full of GMOs and toxic. So it goes back to what the animals are eating again, and then we are eating the animals. So I want to mention that dairy also, I would not eat tons of dairy. We're not meant to be eating that much dairy. Matter of fact, we're the only animal of the animal kingdom that eats other people's milk and drinks other people's milk. So it's a big controversy, but I like dairy, but I'll give you some ideas on what you can do on that next. Accepted oils. We have here a little bit of an avocado, and we have this should be olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, things like that. This doesn't represent enough food in there for me to be able to talk about what I would call accepted oils, but you want to have limited amount. We don't want to be eating it by the gobs, and we want to cook at lower heat with this, because when it cooks at a higher heat, it ends up causing, there's a toxin that gets on it that of course makes it so good, but it's like putting plastic on the top of your food. It's called acrylamide, and it's in my ebooks that I talk about why you have to be careful about eating high carcinogenic foods that are like broiled, that are barbecued and all of that. So I say limited and lower heats for all of these oils. Whole grains, again, I'm just going to touch that whole grains should be limited the amount that you eat, and sprouted if you can, because most of them are very toxic. We know we have a gluten intolerance issue right now, off the charts. When I was diagnosed, in my late 40s, I'm in my early 60s, I was one of the few that was gluten intolerant that I knew about. Now it's like everywhere. The restaurants are accommodating, and the food's out there, and it's also not great. Industrial seed oils, I just want those gone. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you need to get my eGUIDE. Industrial seed oils are what is causing so many chronic heart issues today and obesity. And, everything from cholesterol, overdose, it has nothing. Your cholesterol issues and blood pressure is all being caused by these seed oils, not healthy oils like avocado oil, like coconut oil, like avocados. And so I just want to make sure you know that. And then processed foods, if processed foods had an organic guideline, that would be great, but guess what? There would not be any on the shelves, because processed foods only survive by chemicals and additives and excess sugar and excess gluten and excess seed oils. Otherwise, they taste awful, because the food is not food. It's zombie ingredients. It turns you into a zombie. It makes you look like a zombie. And that's why most of us walk around with brain fog today. And we have such a big issue. So this is my dream. And I'm just going to say that was something I wanted to put on here so you could see what I would have added had Bobby asked me about it. So anyway, and here is the food pyramid that was I found from the early 90s until the early 2000s. And what you can see, it's upside down here. We've got the heavier weight at the bottom and the smaller portion at the top. And this was just really funny because I thought it was hilarious how they put fats and oils and sweets, which we know healthy fats and healthy oils are so important, and they lumped it all in with sweets. And so this was a combination here of sweets and oils at the top, which is not very much. And then of course, dairy was almost balanced with meat and fish and beans and eggs and things like that. Then you had a vegetable servings, and the fruit, probably I'd put less fruit on this, but this is where they kind of concentrated on those two areas of what we need to be eating. Wasn't too bad of a suggestion. And then of course at the bottom is your bread, cereals, rice, pasta group. That was supposedly the main part of our diet, which is so upside down. It's just, no, those foods, not only are they turn to sugar in your system, all of those, anything that you eat that's heavily processed, that is from a grain, turns to sugar in your system, which obviously is why we have so many insulin resistant issues now, and obesity, and obviously just everything from, need I say more? So I'm going to show you here, I started to say diabetics and pre-diabetics. So here are the comparison really quickly. You can see how it's been turned upside down, grains at the bottom. Here it was grains of our past, down at the bottom being the larger portions of what you eat. And, again, they don't divide everything up here, but I think it was just referencing how real whole foods are much healthier than obviously processed and in cans and bottles. I don't really like that they have a can of green beans here. I don't really like that they have packages of peas in a bag, but you are finding more organics like that, and that's perfectly fine for folks that's all they can afford, and or that's all they can manage without getting fresh produce in the house all the time, but you want fresh as much as you can. And then I want to touch really quickly here on how I was taught as a health coach. So I'm a Primal health coach. A lot of people ask, what does Primal mean? And basically it just means that we focus on what our ancestors ate. So if our ancestors didn't eat it, we shouldn't be eating it. And the reason why is because our DNA and our genes haven't changed at all. But what has changed is our lifestyle and our foods, and that's what's causing all these chronic issues. So you can see here on the bottom, heavily weighted as a paleo. Now this was kind of paleo centered, and I've modified this. I don't do primarily paleo. I will eat carbs. This is excluding carbs, even simple carbs. So it's not carb heavy at all. It shows up here in moderation foods, sweet potato, squash, quinoa, wild rice, those kinds of things, even dark chocolate. And then obviously over here, your fruits. It's a moderate amount of things that you would eat, not carte blanche to be eating those all the time. But, and I do eat them. I do eat probably more than I should, just because I do notice some difference in my diet when I eat more of those. But the one thing I don't eat very much anymore is your breads and your crackers and those kinds of things, unless I make them myself at home, which I do. And so you can see here how it moves up the pyramid. We've got the vegetables heavy on the bottom, then it goes to the meat, the fish, fowl, and eggs. Paleo is more about animal products, and that to me, as long as it's in moderation, I'm not eating it every day, and I'm rotating those animal products. But I also rotate vegetables that are full of protein. And we know mushrooms, for instance, artichokes. There's some things that are super satiating that I include in my diet when I'm not eating animal products. And then we have obviously let's see here, mentioning about, I keep losing my cursor, emphasizing on the meat, fish, and fowl and eggs that local, pasture raised, and organic certified. And then of course on the other side is making sure that we're not eating that we're getting healthy fats in our diet. And again, it's like your butters and your ghees and your dairy and things like that, and I'm all for yogurts, really clean, healthy yogurts, not the little can. Okay, I had a beef here. Here's one of those little travel yogurts that I've never picked up a travel yogurt that's not crap. I mean, this is just sugar. sugar disguised with a little bit of yogurt in it. And so again, if it's not organic, you've got everything from the cow that it's eaten and all of the GMO products and stuff that's in there. And then it's just loaded with sugar that's been heavily processed as well. And we know that, again, everything has herbicides and pesticides on it. So don't ever look at yogurt in those containers again as being healthy. They are not. You need to get Bulgarian yogurt. You need to get full fat yogurt. And so the whole debunking method about, what was a myth about how full fat was causing all the heart issues. I could talk about that another time too. So as you move up the pyramid, you'll see the moderation foods, like I said, and then at the very top is herbs, spices, and extracts. So we do want to mix in at least 30 different foods every day. That's what I've been told. Try to count your foods, varieties of food you're eating every day. See what you can come up with, and you can count every spice that you put in. You can put in all your salt and pepper and herbs. You can mention if you've got different, all the 5 or 10 or 15 different vegetables you could mix in a stir fry, for instance. And then you're getting a little bit of the grains. If you are eating some healthy rice, you want organic only. And I'm now resorting to white rice because the brown rice theory has been debunked too. The shell on the outside is where all the chemicals get into. And it's very interesting because brown rice, we were eating it for a long time. Somebody got lazy, didn't want to take the hull off, and said it was good for fiber. And unfortunately, rice has a lot of arsenic in it. So we have to be very, very careful and mindful. So organic, I can't say that enough. And if you're eating at restaurants, you're not getting organic. So just know you're not getting organic at restaurants. You're getting farm-fed fish and seafood. And you do not want to be buying any prawns or shrimp from Vietnam and overseas, because they have been proven to be extremely toxic environments that they're growing those, that they're raising those animals in. So please be mindful of that. And so lastly on this, I just want to mention that the Primal Blueprint Food Pyramid, which I said that I'm very rigorous about following this as much as I can, because when I do, I always feel better. And this is when I clean up my diet and notice I'm having some symptoms. You want nutritious, satisfying, high nutrient value, low insulin stimulating foods. So that basically means simple carbs, all of your breads, all your rice, all your pastas, all of your your fruit that's got a lot of sugar in it. And you want to eat them with the skin on. You do not want to be drinking juices of any of these fruits because they're super concentrated and literally spiking your blood sugar and causing issues there. Low carbohydrate, moderate protein, ample nutritious fats, and flexible choices and meal habits by personal preference. Of course, you want to adjust to your taste buds, but you want as much variety, at least up to 30 different vegetables, fruits, spices, herbs, everything in your diet as much as you can, and free of grains, sugars, and refined vegetable oils. And those are, again, the two that I'm going to mention that are so toxic right now are corn oil and soybean oil. And that's in everything. It's the most highly produced grains in the United States. It's the most exported. So not only are countries buying all of our grains, which I find fascinating, they're getting polluted as well because everything is genetically modified here in the mass quantities that it is. And it's full of herbicide, pesticides, and that darn glyphosate, which is the toxic ingredient in Roundup that took my father out at 101. And it was devastating to see what he went through. And I'm going to do a talk about that. You're going to see pictures. I have to get the nerve to do it, but I'm going to be sharing that about my sweet dad. So I think that's it on the share of the PowerPoint. And let's see, we're okay for a few minutes. I hope that was not too fast. I mean, I really wanted to go through and share with you that turning the pyramid upside down for our food industry right now is so critical because these corporations are getting called out, and it's about time. You notice there weren't any cereal boxes on any of that stuff either, because that's what I grew up with, was cereal boxes, and I'm appalled about what I was eating. Fruit Loops, all of these horrible cereals that were sweet junk. They were basically sugared and sweetened and colored with that red dye stuff that's got, all the dyes that are so toxic right now that at least a lot of the moms across America and folks that are working hard and diligently to get those out of our ingredients. It's happened, but the cereals are still cereals. They're still basic junk. So I highly recommend that, you pay attention to your children, your children's children. I mean, you've got to pay attention. It starts at an early age with these chronic issues. That's when they started for me. And so certainly at 40, when I realized what was going on, I'd lost a lot of years of taking good care of my health because of what I had been consuming. And I even grew up with a father that had a vegetable garden, and we had vegetables and fruit trees. And so we did pretty well. But we didn't eat out the way we did. Eating out was like a specialty, and we certainly only did it once on occasion. And I've got a son who's 28. And he and his girlfriend were here visiting, and I would say they were here for almost 3 weeks. We saw them probably half a dozen times eating at our house, but most of the time they were out socializing and at dinners and visiting and eating out all the time. So we know that the younger generation is getting polluted earlier and earlier in their age, and they're starting to show chronic symptoms as well. So it's really important that you know that. And I have something really funny to share that I don't know if you're following RFK Jr.'s panel and advisors, but there's a gentleman by the name of Callie Means, and he's advising RFK Jr. on a lot of this information. He was telling a story about he's been talking to doctors and obviously specialists around the country, and he's got a good friend who's a doctor, and this woman was really mad at him and said, "I cannot believe what you're doing. You're causing ruckus to all of my to the community and to all of my patients." And he said, "Well, what are you talking about? I'm telling people to pay attention to what they're eating, and it's going to relieve symptoms." And she said, "No, what's happening is she runs one of the largest dermatology offices in the country, and literally, she gets people in, gets them out, and in 8 minutes she sees a patient." And she said, now patients are coming in. They used to come in, I got 8 minutes with them. They told me they had psoriasis, they had acne, they had, all kinds of, whatever rash they had on them, whatever their condition was, she could get them seen and medicated, and they're out the door. Well, now they're taking 16 minutes. Can you believe it? Oh my God. Taking 16 minutes of her time and asking root cause questions. And this is unheard of in today's environment, where we have it's like such a juxtaposition between, such extreme illnesses that we have, and then awakening folks that are paying attention. And root cause is what the reason is. And what that means is going back to why you're having the acne, why you're having the psoriasis, why you're having these symptoms. And she said, now people are taking my time asking me, all these questions. And she says, I'm not, I'm a dermatologist, but I'm not a, food and nutrition specialist, but her job is still to do no harm. And so she's annoyed because she wants to write the prescription and get them out the door. And he thought it was, he argued with her and said, well, that's the way it's got to be. We need to be doing this work now. And so it's going to be has to be a ripple effect, so that the cost of care is reasonable and affordable, and that the insurance aren't gouging everybody and pushing these doctors to just get patients in and get patients out, because Big Pharma is pushing all of the medications. So you have to follow the money trail and see what's going on. So anyway, he thought it was actually quite interesting that she was not happy with him. And I thought it was a good story that people are actually asking and taking their care into their own hands. And that, again, that's what I love so much about the work we do here with, excuse me a minute, I was going to pull up something. The work that we do here with Lifewave and all of these really healthy, safe products that are really, changing the paradigm. Sorry, I keep losing my notes here. Changing the paradigm of, using medications to solve all these symptom issues that everybody's having, especially pain. And why we love Lifewave, because it is a product that is safe and harmless, and certainly doing a good job of keeping a lot of people out of their doctor's offices and in their homes and in their kitchens, where healthy begins. And of course, if you know me, you've heard me say that a lot. And I really want people focusing on real food and stocking your refrigerators and pantries with food that is safe and supportive. Once again, I encourage people that if any of this is interesting to you or you want to know more, that particular video was on the maha.org website, makeamericahealthyagain.org. .org website. And you can read the whole article because I have a lot of information here that we're not going to have time to go over. But it was really fascinating to see the shift that's happening. And I'm excited, and you should be excited. And especially if you are a Lifewaver, that we're in such good hands with our founder, David Schmidt, because he's taken us to another level of health that, you know, the food is going to be shifting, and we're going to be seeing more and more organics, and we're going to see more and more accountability for these foods that are harming. And hopefully the price, remember, when you vote for your, you can vote with your dollar by buying organics and eating less. The whole thing is cheap food is cheap for a reason, and you can buy the supersized packages of things at Costco. Even one of my healthy ingredients, healthy foods that I like to eat, is called Siete corn chips, and they're actually made of cassava flour. They're pretty clean. They're made with cassava flour, avocado oil, and, you know, obviously they're still, you know, baked or fried, but it's a good alternative for folks, and I eat them. At Costco the other day, they had a supersized family pack so that you could eat more of it. And this is the problem, you guys, is that we are overeating. And it's obvious when you see people because of the size of a lot of the population, but it isn't about that. It's because their fat cells cannot handle we have cells in our body that end up making us fat. And when the food comes in that is foreign, like all of these chemicals, these additives, you know, the glyphosate, all of the pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, you know, that I've been talking about, the body doesn't know what to do with it. And so it stores it in your fat cells. And then when it doesn't have, obviously, any more room in those cells that normally could store toxins, then it starts overflowing. And this is where we end up with gaining weight. And so it's not our fault. It was intended this way. So if people can recognize that's what Bobby Jr. is doing. I don't know why I'm calling him Bobby. RFK Jr. is doing. I wish he was my friend. I could talk to him. I want to help him with his throat. It's like, oh my gosh, we got a patch for that. But I just think that his whole message has always been accountability and these companies that are making profits over people. So just saying, vote with your dollar, buying products that are safe and healthy. That, you know, we are going to be seeing more and more healthy foods come out, and you want to be supporting those companies because that is going to make the other companies, the Heinz ketchup of the world, you know, the Fruit Loop manufacturers, the Nabiscos, all of those big box names that we all grew up with that we thought were innocent, they're going to start fading away or dying a slow, painful death, because that's what they've caused so many of our society to die from, or they're going to have to change themselves. But I'm going to be honest, they're not going to be able to make the massive processed foods that they are, because the chemical industries and all of that will slowly lose their momentum because people aren't buying the products. So you don't want your food made by chemists. You want your food made by nutritionists and specialists. So anyway, I hope that you got a little bit out of this. If nothing else, watch the recording again if I went too fast, and read labels. You've got to do that. You've got to read ingredients. And like I said, my ebooks give you the guide. They give you the support. It tells you everything you need to do in the ebook. And the reason why I wrote it was so that you didn't have to go to anybody. You become independent. That's what we want. We want you to be self-sufficient, like we used to be, like our parents were. Think about it. You know, generations past, we never went to the doctor. Only if you broke something or had an emergency or an injury. So thank you again for being here. It was nice to be able to share this. I'm so excited to be doing more things like this in the future, and how we can weave in using the products with what I'm talking about. And I'm certainly also looking for feedback, and be sure, and if you're subscribing or haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, Suzanne Roth-paul Phototherapy. It used to be Lifewave. It's now Phototherapy. Please subscribe. You're helping me really get the word out, and you're really doing a great job by commenting and liking things, which gives me more visibility, and we get more people knowing about the product. Share my videos with your community so that they can learn, and they can also play it forward with their family and their communities. All right, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for being here. Bye.